and we're just going to dive in. I have some just, thoughts and questions about my process with learning natural dyes, and I'm just so excited to have people who I admire and are inspired by here today to just have some reflection and talk about all these different sustainable processes and how we can amplify what we're doing individually and collectively. So today we have a group of panelists, and we have Margot, we have Megan. They're all going to introduce themselves, but I kind of just wanted to go down the line. We have Tahaj, Amalia, Ian, and Cara. So I want to thank first Arcadia Earth for having us. This is an amazing space, and if you haven't been to the museum, you can come back and use our code COLOR for a little discount to see the museum, see some of the upcycled art pieces, and it just really fits in with my ethos as a designer and some people here as well, just using found material, using foraged material, using what's already out there because we have enough stuff. And before we just turn to the panelists, I wanted to kind of just share a small moment of my journey. My name is Hannah Ross. My artist name is Hanooks, and I have loved color since a very early age. And my first job was at the New York City Ballet costume shop. It was amazing. It was my favorite job, 3-4 years of just making color for these amazing dancers. I would spend hours making beautiful colors for the designers and working with this collaborative team to make these costumes. And over time, I realized that the lab was not really fit for using these synthetic materials in a safe way. So we hired an industrial hygienist, and he said, it's actually not fit. We're shutting down the lab. You lose your job. It's over. And I was like, oh, wow. It was so quick and so abrupt. And I basically killed my job. And I was like, this is a question I have for myself. If I'm not protected at this level, who is being protected? And I had my, just really made me think, really made me realize that all through the process, there's all this unseen and unnoticed hands that are going into these materials that are not good for our body, not good for the earth. So I'm an enthusiast. I teach a lot of workshops. I now have my studio upstate New York, Hudson, New York, and I just really want to spread awareness through my art, through lifting other people's art up about these toxins and these materials in our life every day. So that being said, I would love everyone here to also share a little bit about themselves. I'd like to hear your name, your brand, your art, what you're working on, and your favorite dye plant, if you must, or mineral or favorite dye material. So, Cara, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, you can just flip the switch at the top.
Can you hear me?
No.
Yes. Oh, good. Hi. Okay. I am Cara Piazza. I run a small-scale natural dye studio in East Williamsburg, New York. I work with different designers, artists, and interior designers to naturally dye their needs. We also have entered into wood as well. So basically, if it's a natural substrate, we will dye it for you. My business is right now mainly B2B, but I also host a lot of workshops and classes. I teach online, and then I also do private custom pieces too for anyone off the street who also wants something dyed as well. My pronouns are she and her, and I feel like this question is like choosing your favorite child. I don't know if I have a favorite. Let me think. I feel like it always switches seasonally. Right now I've been really into working with Kutch, which is from the acacia tree, and there's this amazing story about there was on a caribou reservation, they started noticing that the caribou were just occasionally dying, and they couldn't really figure out what was going on. And they brought a specialist in, and they realized that the acacia trees were communicating with each other and just producing enough tannin to keep the population of the caribou controlled. So it's literally a killer tree. And it makes a killer natural dye. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian. My brand is Allen Greer. I'm based in Harlem, New York City. I have a dye studio in East Harlem, and I produce everything between the garment district and a few different factories in the South Bronx as well. My collection is all naturally dyed by hand by me on vintage and dead stock textiles sourced from, side of the street to the garment district, really from everywhere. My pronouns are he, him, and I think right now my favorite dye material, I have a long love for red onion skin. It's like tried and true. But I also have a tie maybe for weld as well, because I love a punchy yellow as well.
Hello, I'm Amalia Maira. I'm a fashion and textile designer based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm also co-founder of Lagoon with Logan over there, and that's a boutique in Bed-Stuy. Please come say hi to us. My pronouns are she, her, and I create clothing and textiles from upcycled and natural fibers mainly, and you can come see some more over there. I can't choose a color, but my favorite dye technique is shibori, which is traditional Japanese tie-dye, and I kind of think about it in my own way, and I think a lot about geodes when I do it, so it's always like a very flowy, and it's always a surprise. So hear more about that later.
My name is Taja, director and designer of Out of Seam. Out of Seam is a garment reconstruction and natural dye entity. So we basically just cut and sew and interpret, reinterpret, flip, bring it back again, remix a lot of different things. Based out of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. We source a lot of our materials from my ancestral land of Belize, Central America. And so, I bring those back. I guess that would inform right now my favorite dye, which is logwood, and it has like a deep entrenched history there, as well as mahogany. I think that was pretty much it. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Megan Newback, and she, her. I have a studio up in the Catskill Mountains in a little town called Grahamsville. I guess my favorite color is indigo. I spent 18 years in the denim industry working for Levi's, Banana Republic, and most recently Ralph Lauren. I currently have a small collection of coats and bedding, and I also have a small scale clients that I work for that I produce like for hats. Speaking of really horrible porous materials like straw that's super hard to naturally dye. And also, I guess that's all. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Margaret. My brand is Margot New York. My pronouns are she, her. I'm based in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and my brand is focused on upcycling clothing, but also using organic new material to make accessories. I specialize in hats, and I work with factories in Manhattan as well as a factory upstate. So I'm very interested in sourcing locally and supporting the community. I think my favorite color would have to be, it depends, it changes, avocado skins. I think just the color variation that I can get from it, and I also just like to use a lot of kitchen waste, and I have a lot of avocado skins, and people keep giving me avocados, which is great. So yeah, I think that's it.
Great, thank you. You can hold on to the mic. So I heard a lot of ideas about using food waste, like with avocado skins, onion skins. So that brings me to my first question is, does anyone have something that came to mind during Deepti's presentation when she was bringing, forward, coming from a different area of fashion, not hands-on creatives like all of us, but like looking to create a system or a centralized place where we can use food waste. Just kind of like a popcorn style. Does anyone have a question for Deepti or some sort of feedback in the moment that comes to mind making this processing center?
Yeah, I think that's, first of all, I had spoken with them before about the process and and I'm like, this has been, one of my missions since I started like about 10 years ago. And I think like, thinking of like natural dyes really sit in this like very beautiful intersection of like turning a waste into resource, right? Like I think the funny thing about natural dyes is also that the things that you would typically think would make a great natural dye actually don't, right? So it's like those shells, the peels, and the skins actually are very rich in tannin, which makes a very, sorry if I'm getting a little nerdy here, mordant, which helps set the dye, right? So like it's like nature's way of telling you to eat your food and use the things you would typically throw away. And what's so brilliant about this project is that it logistically is feasible, right? Like it's doable. We just need to get the manpower together. So anyone in the audience, like, think about it. Like, send us all ideas. Like the connection that Conscious Color is creating is really valuable. And I think like, there are so many different waste streams that we can tap into. Like I partner with a company called Garbage Goddess that essentially like composts flowers post-event, like industry events. And the flower waste in the fashion industry is insane, but even just weddings, right? Like flowers come from South, like, we don't use local flowers. So just like thinking about these different industries that could all kind of like collaborate and forgive the pun, pollinate is a way to like turn something that typically would be thrown away into something that's quite beautiful, and like figuring out the logistics of that. Like I used to collect buckets of trash from the White Hotel. And when I say buckets, I mean like 10 gallons.
Wow.
It's a nightmare. Like truly, they don't clean it. So, I think it's like, but that dirty process really gave me like a really amazing insight into like what we're wasting and like what can be done as well. So I'm excited by it. So good job, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just, I guess, wondering how Garbage Goddess functions and how Deepti was thinking that all the garbage would be collected throughout the city, or what scale are you thinking also?
Yeah, Deepti, if you'd like to come up and just say a few words, like just a little 2-minute synopsis on this. Just how. It's a messy process.
Yeah. So. Okay. So the idea, as I mentioned, was to like really go to places. For example, like brewery, there are a lot of pomace which is there, which you can actually use for dye. So going to the places who have that in excess. For example, all these places who are already having that sorted is the idea, versus us trying to sort everything individually. The idea to go to a restaurant is you would get a lot of different materials, but nothing is sorted. So we want to think intelligently and go to places who are already doing sorting, plus also looking at the legal side, looking at the farms. These are some of the places we want to go. Like farms I think is a very good idea, as well as supermarkets wherein there's so much of wastage happening. Yeah, I have Vishlika also, who's part of my team.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm feeding her information. What I was going to say is that because of regulations for the state and city, you have to have, for us to call ourselves resourcers, we have to have things sorted first. If it's not waste, then we have to become waste aggregators, and that's not what we want to do. So we would like to go to food processors' farms. So go to that red cabbage, the yellow oranges, onion peels. Go to those farms that have waste on the floor. We're like the misfit markets for dyes. You know what I mean? So we want to be able to take that waste, instead of it going to a landfill, make beautiful dyes for you.
Thank you so much. I feel like as a designer who loves to also use waste, it's very exciting to merge the two worlds, the creatives and this center. So please keep us updated on Conscious Color, how it is unfolding. And This kind of brings me to the next section of the panel, where I'm really interested in how you're balancing like full-time work and creating on the side. Specifically, Ian, Megan, Margot. Like, I know that I'm not saying that everyone doesn't have full-time work. I'm not fully sure, but I know that you're working directly in fashion and then turning around on the nights and on the weekends, like doing your own collection. And what are some things that, one, you've really learned, and yeah, so what's something that like amplifies your process from this job?
Okay. Yes. I ask myself this question all the time because I'm very exhausted most of the time, but I love it. I think so I've been working in the industry for about 10 years, and I've been working on Margot for the last 2. And I think the biggest things I've learned is to set boundaries, and that's in my personal life as well as my professional life, and prioritize. So just what is important to me, and where do I want to spend my emotional time and my mental time. And I also have learned very specifically how I work. So in the morning, my mind is really sharp, but my body is very slow moving. So that is when I am planning, I'm doing emails, I'm doing just like the bookkeeping, I guess. And I also wake up really early. I'm a morning person, I am not a night owl. So that's another thing you learn about yourself. And then in the evenings, my mind is dead, but my body wants to be active. So that's when I want to paint and dye and be more creative. And I think besides having priorities pinned down and boundaries is really having a plan, because this life is not sustainable doing 2 things. It's not for a very long time. So it is really about having like a future goal, like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, even like a 2-year plan of just like, where am I going to be in 2 years? How am I going to like transition? So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Integrate. So I had the opportunity, because I was a wash developer for Ralph Lauren, that I would work on weekends and create natural dye concepts and then put them into my workplace. I would take them with me when I would travel. I would show them. Back to one of the previous videos as well. Yeah, there's so many natural dyers, especially in India, that are ready and willing and able, but it's just the fashion industry is too massive. Once it scales down, and work on that one first, we can actually get some more natural dyers in like a big, I don't know if it'll ever go to a corporate setting. I mean, that's completely daunting to me to even think about that, but it's just as much as you can integrate your passion and what you want to do on the side into your regular life.
Yeah, that brings up something of like, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, great, you're using natural dyes. That's the answer. Yeah. But it's actually not. We need to slow down production. We need to, just make less before we can apply these plants to the current system. Exactly. And that's also a reason I wanted to just talk to everyone today, because share a little bit of knowledge about natural dyeing is not the Band-Aid that will make fashion sustainable. Actually, it can cause a lot of harm. If you're not using the correct sources, if you're using really amazing heartwood plants, for example, logwood, like your favorite dye. I love logwood so much, but some, sources are just cutting down 100-year-old trees, causing deforestation. Yeah. And then that ends up being more harmful than maybe using the synthetic product to begin with. It's very hard.
Yeah, definitely. Even this like, like the mass migration to Mexico, like everyone's going to Mexico, and that's like a whole natural dye thing there. And like, of course it's beautiful to have the revitalization of indigenous cultures and ancient wisdom, but it's like, it's finite. Like also our earth is like definitely changing. Like it doesn't rain as much in the same locations that it once did, or it's not expected to, the same predictability that we had for years is not it anymore. So yeah, also in response to the, upkeep of like day life and then your passion and having the integration as well, I think also just finding an ecosystem of people who definitely like can support and like be into that. So I just loved like being around people and like going outside and like talking to my coffee shop person and my wine place and like literally making ideas out of that. And like, okay, we have all this stuff. Can you put this on our shirts? Boom, that's a thing. Like tea, like a whole bunch of stuff, and like allowing people to like get educated in the process, because like a lot of people, I mean, we're here in the room and that's great, but like it's still very new. And like when we use some of the language that we use, I think people have a preconceived notion of like what they already think that that means. And it's like, no, it's actually real. Like it's in your life, it's in your day-to-day choices. It's not this like out of you thing that you read in an article and it needs to be, you know, prescriptive. It's like, it's actually, you know, a part of your lifestyle. And so going back to what you were saying as well, is just like allowing it to be a part of your flow. Like I flow in the mornings and like I just wake up and just start washing things and like putting things in pots and like having my cauldron and like going all in there, and like it becomes this whole thing. And then I like think about life while I'm doing it, and I'm like, oh shit. And I just have major, sorry if I curse, but yeah, just like major epiphany moments. And I feel like that's a part of it. Like it's very therapeutic in that sense, and it becomes a part of like my function in a way, where it's like, even if, you know, I just had a 9 to 5 over the summer, and that was like serious hardcore stuff, and every morning, because it's like my morning tea, like quite literally. So I had to do it to like be operational in a way. Yeah, exactly.
Quick follow-up on that. I just like, I just love where you wrote the water that comes from the inside is both environmental and emotional. As in one of your workshops, one of your garments. I'm not sure where I found it, but it's just what you're saying. So thank you. Love that. And Amalia.
I just completely agree. And I mean, different to you guys, I am a night owl in a big way. And I really, like, I truly have busy fingers. I need to crochet like for a while before I can go to bed. Like, it is so therapeutic. And I mean, just to speak to your point about community, like inspiration and materials come from quite everywhere. And once people know you're doing this stuff, they come out of the woodwork. We've had people come to Lagoon and say, what are you girls doing in here? And then months later, they'll come back with garbage bags filled with like gems. It's crazy. So it's, I mean, it's everywhere, and it's just balancing when we do what, but once you know yourself. Yeah. And we're always learning, right?
Can I add to that real quick?
Yeah.
I just want to say, like, on the going outside part, like, this is cheesecloth. Like, I just wanted to...
Wow. Yes.
I made some costumes for 80s Town, and we also used
Use
that.
cheesecloth, yeah. And everyone's like, oh my God. Because, you know, there's this, you know, cotton, linen, silk, like we know. But it's like, you have to imagine. Like, it's like you go outside and, like, you think about things differently. And I feel like not being afraid to just be like, fuck it, whatever. Let me just see. What's the worst that can happen? At least you tried. So, yeah, it's like you can do it. You should do it. Like, it's fun.
Well, that's like sustainable fashion is all about seeing things out of context. Like, what is the inherent potential of a material? Like, upholstery is really good for outerwear and, you know, jackets, winter wear. It has a lot of armature. It's warm because it's thick. So you never know what you're looking at.
Yeah, I like what you said about just like not being afraid to like ask for what you want in that way as well. And I think it goes back to Deepti's presentation as well, like building the supply chain that we want to see, because like also goes back to your question about, you know, how balancing a day job and having any kind of sustainable effort on the side. I work for like a large fashion brand, boo, and I do feel so caught inside that supply chain a lot of the time. And with my brand, what I really aim to do is build the supply chain that I want to see locally for myself. And that quite literally is like me going up to like knocking on businesses' doors and being like, hi, I'm here. What resources do you have? What do I have? Like the way that I've met like at least 3 of the factories that I work with locally in New York is just by going up to different businesses, like different boutiques or other brands, and being like, who are you? Where do you produce? And kind of like, some people are a little bit like, I'm not going to tell you, but which I get to an extent. But I think the most we can do to like build what we want to see out there is really special as well. And also finding the balance, like you were saying as well. Like most of the time, I'm very lucky that I don't have to go into the office every day, which is a function of COVID, which is, but I can be at my dye studio, like on a Zoom call and then like swirling a dye pot in the background, which is lovely. So I think also like making your circumstance work for what you want to do is also really, really key due to like in time management and just like seeing what you want out in the world.
That's so great. Thank you, Ian, so much. Thank you, all of you. And that kind of brings me to my next question. How does the textile community versus the fashion industry focus on abundance, knowledge, sharing, and this like seemingly decentralized approach to just what you're saying, sharing resources? And
before you do, can I ask a question?
Oh, of course, yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna
You can.
this.
Ooh. Yeah, I love that. Love out of blue.
Perfect. No. Okay, fine. I introduce myself. I'm Valentin. I'm the founder of Arcadia Earth, right? So you guys are here, and I just wanted, before you do that, you started it, and I felt like a sequence of pain, right? Oh my life, oh my God, it's so hard, oh my God. And I'm so thankful for that pain, and I really wanted to tell you that you inspire me that much by just constantly doing it. And without people like you, there is no climate change, right? So just like I remember 20 years ago, a bunch of hipster with all their fucking tattoo, they went to Brooklyn and they start saying, yo, if it's not organic, we don't buy it. And now all of a sudden, organic is a thing, right? That it's a movement, right? And so over here, we started with Greta 5 years ago, and we did a riot, and and became. So you are climate change, right? So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Also, if anyone wants to come up and, sneak in out of the blue, it's okay. I love it. And he's right. What we do is hard, and you face challenges time and time again. And especially, I do have, some background working in the fashion industry, and I felt that was very individualistic. It is about the top down. That's the system. It's not a circular system. It's not decentralized. It's not transparent. It's built upon these solid walls that you can't see behind. You don't know what's happening. And so I'm not sure, maybe Cara, you have some insight on this, like the fashion industry versus the textile community and some things that come up for you.
Yeah, I grew up in New York, and I was interning in fashion since I was 16. So I really saw everything you could see, and I think I in one way, and it's, I think I watched the actual toxicity of the fashion industry was one of the reasons why I really was drawn to the natural dyeing world. And I think not just the physical toxicity, but the mental toxicity of it. I mean, I was interning from interning, not getting paid, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. partying, going back the next, not getting paid. That's crazy, but we did it because we loved fashion, right? We were oh, this is awesome. And I'm that's crazy. So yes, boundaries, right? Learning that, I'm 33, it takes a while. But I think what I found was it also really taught me how I didn't want to be a boss. Right? It taught me how I did. And COVID was an amazing opportunity. I had interns for years, and I had this really big reckoning where I was wow, if this business can't run with me paying everyone in my office, I don't have interns anymore. Because it's that's not the way to run the industry. But I think because I came up as an intern, but I have privilege. I was able to, right? I lived in my mom's apartment. That's how this works, right? I was a press manager for a while. I was running around slinging diamonds in the diamond district, right? That's crazy. I'm a natural dyer. That's the truth, though. So it's this is we've all done the jobs we had to do to get where we had to be, and I think that's what it really takes. The thing that's been really beautiful about the natural dye community, what I've also heard from all of you, is that we all might have a funny gift of the gab too. The way that my like career kind of flourished was just because I would tell everyone what I was doing. And then someone else would be like, oh, can you do that for my vintage store? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And then someone else would be like, hey, could you dye these dresses? And I'd be like, okay. I have wanted to quit so many times. And the second I feel like I'm going to throw in the towel, the universe sends me another client without fail. So it's like, I feel like the medium chose me, and I think the beauty of the natural dye community is everyone is so open, and they share, and they give resources, and there's like 1,000 YouTube videos out there free, and it's just like, it's crazy over there. Like, but like, I think that not having also that like purist mentality of being like 100% sustainable is also part of the conversation, because it's like, how do we just start making that effort? And like Taja was saying, it's like, just start trying, right? Like, just like make that little effort that you can, because I think when you kind of like go into that mindset of like, it has to be 100% sustainable, it's like, that's impossible. There's nothing ethical
Not
in
possible.
consumerism. It's just like, that doesn't work. So I think I just went on a tangent, and I'm gonna pass it back to Ian.
Thank you, Cara, though. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It makes like also complete sense. I also think like within the textile community, like I'm like in her DMs all the time and like texting her, like being like,
I love it.
yeah, and being like, wait, what's going on? A, and B, also like, does this look cool? Like, does this look good? Like, what's the deal? Or like, who do you work with? Like that kind of thing. I also think is really important.
Talk about what you charge to everybody.
Yeah.
Talk about what
That's
you charge
great.
Because if you charge less,
That
then she's
so
or
important.
I are charged, like, then it's gonna get a little confusing for the girls out there. But what I will say also is like, a lot of people's avenue into natural dyeing is this like really small scale, like me with onion skins in my like old pasta pot in my kitchen in my apartment, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. And then everyone gets addicted to it, and like that is also how the community grows. But I also think like it's very open source. Like I taught myself how to do this with like YouTube videos, literally, or like natural dye manuals from like the 50s at the FIT library, like randomly, or like Google like how to natural dye, like that kind of stuff. Like the barrier to entry here is not very high, and I think, which is amazing, because I think that means that like we can all kind of like make a better future in that way, because I think there is this like lofty kind of like persona around natural dyeing, that it's like this like artisan, expensive like thing, and it can be 100% that, and there's all this like incredible knowledge from around the world that should be protected and treated as such, but like the avenues into it and to make better choices come from us collectively talking and like genuinely just being curious, I think, as well.
Yeah. Being curious, and I have this question to maybe whoever feels called, like, we are, keeping a lineage of natural dyeing from all around the world. I mean, there's lineages in all different countries, except the United States in a lot of ways. I'm sure that there was all sorts of natural dyeing from all the indigenous people that are on this land, but I'm curious, like, is there any heritage or country or area of the world that you feel personally you're expressing or rewriting or keeping that alive, like through your art and through your practice? Does that come up for anybody? Yeah, Tash?
Yeah. I don't even know where to start. I mean, like, yeah. Well, like I was saying, my family's from Belize, and I didn't even know anything about how deeply entrenched like the logging industry was there until I got into dyes. And very similarly to Cara, like I'm from Brooklyn, and I'd grown up like just like being a kid and getting into this and getting into that, and you kind of do different things and figuring it out along the way. So I'd been in retail, styling, like so many different avenues and arenas, and I just like was bored and like honestly. And one day I met this Parisian woman, and she was so like big, like her person, she was just like everything, and I was just like, she just like was such a magnet, and she taught me everything she knew. She's like, I'm leaving for Paris in 2 days. Here you go. And yeah. Yeah, and same thing with the reconstruction. Like I met this old, like 70-year-old Italian guy who came into my retail gig, and he's like, "You're cute, you're funny, you're fly, I like you. Come." And I was just like, okay, obviously sketched out, but like, I'm happy I did it, because it's like it would be, if something's weird, and it wasn't. And he literally taught me how to sew, how to do a whole bunch. So I've had amazing mentorship and guidance from complete strangers who just like believed in me. I was running away from clothes because I was just like, I don't know anything it's weird. So yeah, but in the research and like doing that and like kind of perfecting it, like my first piece was not anything up to par. Like I used vinegar and nothing with avocado came out in any way, shape or form, like anything I have done that you see here today. So yeah, it was a bunch of experimentation, but as I was doing research and reading and going in the archives, kind of what you were describing and you know, doing the research and, you know, getting into that part of it and the more like, you know, the intellectual space and the history and the science and the chemical structures and how it really is like bonding and breaking and putting things back together and apart. I got super entrenched and fascinated with that. And, you know, just doing my research with Logwood, literally just researching how do I do this? And it was like, it gave me this whole history of my ancestral land of Belize, and I had no idea and no clue, and no one in my family knew either, because, you know, like you were describing, the deforestation had been happening, so it's heavily regulated now, and, you know, obviously for good reason, and obviously the people there on the land, you know, they have a very different, I feel like the way we talk about things here in America is like protect, preserve, save, because it is so wasteful, but other places have been doing that, like they've never stopped, like they actually don't have the privilege to necessarily be wasting things like that. So they're coming from a perspective that's already very embracing of the land in its original form. So yeah, and then going there created like a huge search and hunt into, you know, how to revitalize and resurface like history essentially, and like doing that through the woods and like just the cultivation that I've had through just that opportunity just to go more into, you know, the lineage and people who have been doing this, and like you said, from all across the world, you know, it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And the most amazing thing, I feel, I've traveled to a few different countries, and I feel like every time there's a very similar spirit that I come across, people who use natural color, who are weaving, who are making in any sort. It is a very open source craft, and it's really amazing. So thank you for that. And, you know, I really would love to move into this question of teaching. And like, do you have a teaching philosophy or something that has inspired you to share with others? Like, you take something from your mentors, and how do you like channel that into your art or your creations? Yeah, it's a big part of everything.
I guess I'll start since I have the mic. Yeah, similarly, I guess, to what I was hearing as well, is like being in the culture of New York. It's like just serendipity. You just walk here and that person's there and you end up doing that and those sorts of things. So I think my teaching like thing, I still have I'm like, is it teaching? Is it designer? Am I this? Am I that? That sort of thing, because it's just creating and I just feel genuinely drawn. But I think allowing people like just the tools and opportunities that don't have to be these like expensive things, or you don't have to go to art school. Like, I've been working in fashion for so long, but I went to school for writing and I was doing research in crypto and like just doing a whole bunch of like other things that are like not at all like in it. So my perspective on creating and creation is very different in that sense. And so I allow people to have the opportunity just to dig into yourself, like go deeper into like what you do, who you are, where you come from, what you like, what's your background, like, and allow that informed rather than this like scale and production. And, you know, it's not everyone wants that. That's just not representative. I feel like that reinforces a very specific hierarchy that's we're all trying to disseminate. And I feel like the dissemination of information is really important. So like, yeah, even if it's something so simple as like the coffee or the wine that I was describing before, and like doing those live workshops, like having one this weekend, and everyone was like, "Ah, my gosh, lemons!"
They take everything off my hair.
Yeah, no, literally, they were like so entrenched. Or like indigo, I was helping Cara like a couple of days ago at a workshop, and I showed them my indigo nails, and they're like, ah, like it's still like just that childhood wonder. I feel is so important, and like being in workshops and teaching settings, like I think like reverts everyone to that initial state of like curiosity and intrigue, and like, oh my God, roses? Are you serious? Eucalyptus, 5 colors? What? Like they have no idea, and everyone's going fucking crazy. I love that. It's so true.
It totally reinfuses the enthusiasm. And I mean, now that at the shop, our studio, I don't know if any of you have been there, but our studio is half the shop. So it's basically performance art on display always. So we get a lot of questions. How do you do this? Why do you do this way? And it's really, you know, it makes you think about the things that we all develop our own techniques for what we do. And it, you know, we don't ever unpack the logic behind these tiny decisions. And it's really awesome to understand it better because someone's highlighting that.
I'll just say quickly, because just a little thing. I don't teach many workshops. I used to before the pandemic. But when I was teaching, I also, like, everyone's like super excited to be there. Everyone's super excited to like get their hands dirty and learn about natural dyeing. But I really wanted to infuse also like, teach them vocabulary about like making better choices, not just with natural dyeing, like be like, these are the reasons that we're using natural fibers. When you're shopping, instead of picking up a polyester top, pick up a cotton top, or maybe not cotton, but like some other things, and just kind of using your platform when people are literally have their eyes on you or listening or like paying to listen to what you're talking about, like teach them how to be better consumers in that way. Absolutely. As well. That's because, or even like I did a workshop with a brand that had like their team come, and I taught them how to do some natural dyeing, and like everyone left with like a glossary of terms about natural dyeing, like mordant, all that, scour, that kind of stuff, but also like fiber types and more educational material so that when they leave that workshop, they know how to natural dye, but they also know how to like shop better and consume better as well, I think is like a really important facet of teaching as well.
Yeah, I think it's like, it was interesting, like I kind of fell into teaching by accident, like a collaborator of mine like asked if I would just host a workshop with her, and I kind of just like felt quite drawn to it and was very excited by it. But like also Taja said, like there is this really, the thing that like shocked me when I started doing workshops was the everyone like left with this like like afterwards there was like this like feel, like I just kind of saw the actual like healing properties of like working with natural dyes like in that way that I think is like, especially like when you teach a class in New York, it's really funny, like everyone walks in and they're tight and they're like, it's not gonna look like yours. And I'm like, well, that's because this is the first time you're doing it. And then just like, it's just this like relief, right? Of like having this like chance to make and play and like create without there really needing to be like a monetary value attached to the end of it. And a lot of my classes is me being like, no, you should not start a scarf company after this, right? Like, it's like, I have to like, but they come. Like these people come and they like bring the duvet and you're like, I cannot dye your comforter in this pot. I'm so sorry. But like, I think it's, you know, but that's fine. Like we can laugh, right? Like it's okay. But I think that there's also, you know, something I should say is like one of the other reasons that I got into teaching was to kind of like, give the opportunity for people who, like the natural dye price point was like cost prohibitive, because I think like natural dyes, the conundrum of sustainable clothing is that it's a luxury price point, because if everyone is paid ethically along the supply chain, the garment should cost $900 US, right? Something like that. And that's like if you're making a New York minimum wage, it should it will probably end up costing $4,000 once it hits retail, and that's crazy, right? Like, so it's like, that's like the people who make the buttons get paid properly. That's the people who make the zippers get paid properly. That's the people who sew the garment gets paid properly. Like, that is, so for me, like, teaching at a lower price point is like, okay, you're actually like giving someone the information to then go and like do this at home with the materials that they have around them, and like also kind of like intercept another waste stream where it's like, okay, like maybe you have, I'm also like, I'm messy, so like I needed a way to like keep my clothes cute, and like if you spill coffee on yourself all the time, bundle dyeing or eco printing is a wonderful way to hide that, right? So it's like you can kind of like give people these fun tricks and tips that might just like save one person from throwing that t-shirt in the garbage, right? And I think though that it is important to say, and like I do want to stress that like the language and the glossary, not only around the natural dyeing, but even around like the word like teaching kind of needs to be changed too. I think it's like there is this inherent like patriarchal like gatekeeping of like the academic and like the mentee-mentor relationship that can kind of be like a little bit frustrating when like a lot of these practices were just like done in community, and they were done in circles, and they were done just like them, you know, people kind of just sharing info. And I think it's like, how can we kind of like switch the conversation to be like I always give a disclaimer, right? I'm like, this is how I do it. If you have a better way of doing it, you tell me, right? Like, this is just what I like to do. This is the way that feels good to me. But like, you know, and that's the beauty of teaching is, honestly, 9 times out of 10, I learn something from all my students. Or like the people who, I don't even think I should call them my students, the people who come and take my classes, right? So it's like they end up teaching me something, or I see them do something in a different way, and I'm like, wow, that was amazing. Like, we'll name it the whatever, the so-and-so. Like, you, congratulations, that's beautiful. So it's like, that's the fun thing, is it's really like a conversation. And I think with a practice like this, where it is something that like I taught myself, and I taught myself from other dyers, like I don't have a lineage. Yeah. I don't. Like, I'm a 4th generation Italian American, right? Like, my great grandparents came here, and like, you know, I think like that's something that as a New Yorker, like we have to kind of talk about, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like I almost had this like fraudulent complex when I started, because I was like, I don't know why I like this so much. Am I allowed to be doing it? And I think that like as long as you like credit all of the people that got you where you were along the way, like that's kind of like the best way you can do it with like grace and dignity, you know?
Absolutely.
I don't like you doing
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. These same questions came up for me when I was traveling a lot in Oaxaca, Mexico. My stepmother's family is from there, and I have this new set of family that lives in Mexico, but I am not Mexican. I'm a white woman from Connecticut, lived in New York a lot of my life, and I had a lot of questions about working with these artisans. I was hired by a company to help them organize their natural dyeing systems. And at first I was like, I can't tell people of one place my way. Like, this just feels wrong. But I was like, you know what, there's probably something I'm going to learn from this anyway. So I decided to go. I lived with this amazing family in Oaxaca and helped them organize their dye lab. And they were so grateful for the knowledge I shared with them, and then they shared with me. It wasn't actually this colonizing moment. It wasn't like stepping on their practice. It was just a share of knowledge, and it was so amazing. And I will take what they taught me, and they still on WhatsApp message me, we're using the WOOF message. We're using the WOOF. We're using the WOOF. They didn't know about weight of fiber percentages at all. They're just using like handful of this, handful of that, drinking a little bit of the dye to make sure it tastes correct, which is amazing. They can really, like this one family in San Pedro Cojones, they can taste what the pH level is. And they were right every time. Wow. With my strips. I'm there with my strips, testing the pH. And they're like, oh, yeah, oh, it's good, it's ready. I was like, wow. It was really, really incredible. So yes to changing the narrative around teaching, whatever it is, sharing, you know, this open source is so amazing. So we are coming to the end of our panel. I would like to sit here all day and talk to all of you about natural dyes all evening. But I just was wondering if anyone has anything else that they would like to share this evening about Lagoon hosting 50 plus designers in Brooklyn, New York. You gotta go check it out. It's an amazing shop. I just gotta, 50 plus, 50 plus. Yeah, anyone? Megan?
I have a tidbit of information. So I'm getting a new studio. It's down in like the main street of my little town. So I have a commercial lease now.
Where's that? Where's that?
Grahamsville.
Amazing.
Sorry, in upstate New York. And I had to do all this research because, of course, it's a small town, and they're like, "You're dying? You're going to have a whole diet?" I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I'm very small scale. It's extremely small scale. It's not going to." And they're like, "Well, what color is our sewage water going to be?" And I was like, "Oh, wow." So it's been really eye-opening and interesting. And so I've been putting together this document. And as I was going through and doing my research, we use for a mordant alum, which is aluminum acetate, and actually that is the same thing that they use in water sewage treatment plants to clean the water. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you that little tidbit of information that I...
Great.
I know, right?
I love that.
I know.
Dump it in.
Dump it in. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
That's amazing.
So I was just, because where the studio is going to be, it's where the watershed district is, and it's all the reservoirs for the New York City drinking water. So you have to be super careful, and I fully understand the questions that they have and why the documents are, but the resources are out there, the natural dyeing.
Yeah.
It's, it's safe for the environment.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for this discussion. Thank you. And just one more final question that we're not going to answer. We're all just going to think about it as we go forward into our lives. Natural dyes and fibers are materials that are directly from the earth. And if we want to move into a system or a wardrobe where we're only using these materials from the earth, how do we use our creativity, our design skills to collaborate with environmental organizations to help set these laws and standards around sourcing, production, and as creatives, how do we grab the attention of these environmentalists who can really enact the change in the entire picture? This is just one tiny piece. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you.